Welcome to the lighter side of the spectrum, the podcast that celebrates the multiple hats we wear and the juggling acts we perform in life. Whether you're parenting kids and teens on the autism spectrum, navigating the ever-evolving healthcare industry, or building a more inclusive and impactful world, this is your space to find connection, inspiration, and growth. Together, we'll share stories, tackle challenges, and explore how innovation and inclusion create better outcomes for everyone. Because no matter the spectrum, there's always a lighter side. Now here's your host, David Kaufer.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the lighter side of the spectrum, where we explore new ways of seeing, understanding, and empowering neurodivergent voices, including the ones who have been overlooked for far too long. I'm your host, David Kaufer. Today's guest is someone whose work has deeply influenced the way I understand autism, communication, and what it really means to presume competence. I'm just so excited. Dr. Elizabeth Torres is a professor at Rutgers University and the director of the Sensory Motor Integration Lab. Her research challenges the old behavioral models of autism and offers a radically different and scientifically grounded perspective. And this is one that sees autism through the lens of sensory motor differences and not behavioral deficits. And we'll be talking about that shortly. So if you've ever questioned what you've been told about autism, which I think many of us have, or if you're raising or supporting a non-speaking individual, this is definitely an episode of conversation you won't want to miss. And we will be weaving in some of our regular segments, including early on, a special autism fact or fiction. We'll also do a tip of the week and parent confession. So with that, Dr. Torres, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we have a lot of ground to cover here. This is a really interesting time, of course, in the world of autism for a lot of different reasons. But why don't we just kind of start off from the top and share a little bit about your journey into studying sensory motor dynamics in autism?
Sure, yeah. So I am not originally a psychologist or an autism researcher or anything like that. I am by training an applied mathematician.
Oh, no kidding.
And a computer scientist. Yeah. So.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. So I have nothing to do with autism really, but when I joined Rutgers, the dean of GSAP, which stands for Graduate School of Applied Professional Psychology.
Okay.
Which, it's a big name for really the place where the head of the board, certified board of applied behavior analysis lives. So it's very powerful. Within Rutgers is the department that has its own, very powerful. Like they have their own autonomy thing. They're not under our dean of psychology. They have their own dean. That dean is now, the former dean is now the chancellor of New Brunswick. Very powerful people funded by the ABA lobby and by the government of New Jersey. And but the person at the time that was the dean of this very, very powerful organization, we bumped into each other, literally. I was carrying a box of books. I was new to Rutgers and I was looking for my office. And she was coming and I didn't see her, and boom, we bumped into each other. And
that sounds like a cliche, out of a movie or something.
It's out of a movie, yeah. And that was my start because she was very nice lady. She passed away, Sandy Harris, and she said, "Hey, let me help you out." And then it's like, "Oh, this is actually my office that they just gave me the number, and I was looking for it, so I just found my office." So I opened the door, brought the books in, the boxes, and she said, "Nice to meet you. I know you're the new faculty. We're next door to you." And we started chatting. And then she says, "What do you work on?" And I said, "Well, I work on a field called motor control or neural control of movement. And we do robotics. We build, models, equations that mimic the how you move the body, how you build a robot that is anthropomorphic and has cognitive and intelligence and so forth. That's what we do. That's what I do. Well, this is like, oh, wonderful.
Okay. That was Stone making an appearance. He likes to pop in during the podcast. He told us he's going to make a waffle with syrup. So please continue.
Okay. So so that was it. And then I said, what do you do? And then she said, we do autism. And I said, well, what is that? I haven't heard. I mean, I've seen it in the news, but and then she tells me, it's a problem with social interactions. And I said, how do you know that? How do you measure it? And that was dead silence.
I love it. It's funny because that's like you're leading into perfectly my next question for you, but go on.
And then I said, how do you measure it? And she said, well, we observe and we take notes. And I said, no way. Because behavior is continuous and we model it with equations of motion. We model like physics, dynamics, geometry. We use differential geometry, which is Albert Einstein geometry in theory of relativity. This is how we measure these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I said, I got to see this by myself. And then she said, I invite you to the Douglas Developmental Disability Center, which is a school that is associated with Rutgers and the GESAP and so forth. I was completely new, 2008. I said, okay. So I paid a visit and I saw what they were doing there. And I said, look, this is all good intentions, but it's all wrong. I mean, this is not how humans learn. You're like imposing top-down control, and that's not how we learn. We are autonomous agents. We're built for autonomy, and you're killing the autonomy of these kids. And
that is, boy, yeah, that's very prophetic, because that's definitely something we've seen, and I've talked about a little bit in terms of, unfortunately, what we've seen with Stone that we're trying to rebuild as well. But yeah, so go on.
So I said, but look, there are ways to do this. You don't have to do it top down like that, and with conditioning and reward, because not even animals should be taught like that. Let's design a research program that we can do this. And she was very open to the idea. And so I applied. I went back to the department, and I thought about it, and then I read everything that had to do with autism. This was August, September, and there was a deadline for the National Science Foundation to apply for a challenging idea, like a risky idea. It was called the Cyber-Enabled Discovery idea.
And this was 2008, right? Okay.
And I said, okay, I'm going to apply for that, and and we'll see. And but I got to learn all the what has been done. So there was no biology. The first thing I noticed is all these people are doing these therapies. They've never put any biology in it. No neuroanatomy, no neurophysiology, no neurodevelopment. It's all words. These are words, abstract concepts that they have made up, but there's no science to it, no physiology. They call it science, but science is something else. So it's not that. So I had to go, out of the autism field at the time, 2008, into different fields that we could bring to apply those tools to actually measure this and come up with a completely different paradigm shift and way of doing things. They gave me a grant. So actually you put this in, you compete with a whole bunch of other people that are competing for these other ideas. Like some people may be proposing something about astrophysics or, energy consumption or whatever. This was just and this was the first National Science Foundation autism grant.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if you know that in science we have the National Science Foundation and the National Institute of Health. So now in the news, there's a lot of things going on about that. The federal funding being cut and so on. Okay, so the National Institute of Health would fund autism research because it's more like a clinical kind of thing, medicine related. But the National Science Foundation funds more like the models, the equations, the math, the computational side of things.
Okay.
So they wouldn't fund a clinical like application like that. It's back then. Now it's a little bit hybrid. They have created hybrid programs to combine the NIH and NSF, but at the time, 2008, but it was all like the equations, the framework, the statistical platform that I was proposing and so forth. So they funded that in collaboration with one of the founding fathers of artificial intelligence, who was is my mentor, Dimitri Metaxa, another person at Rutgers who's like a genius. And we team up and we created these, the idea that I had when I visited Douglas, how to do that. So I did that, and then we enlisted computer science students to help us build the interface and program, and so we went like mobile. So we went to Douglas and we recorded these kids. And in the way that we put this, that I made this paradigm, which is in a way that evokes the self-discovery of action consequence rather than imposing top-down action consequence. So the child discovers, like, this is me moving, and this is the consequence of what I just did, and this is my hand, and so on. And it intrinsically creates a reward system intrinsically. Is the child himself that discovers, this is my hand, this is me, I'm in control, I own the action. As opposed to having somebody giving you a sugary treat because they told you this is the target.
They told you to do something, and then
Right.
you did it, and then
Right.
then you get
we evoke that action, and so without telling them what to do. And that simple thing, it seems very subtle, very powerful, was so powerful. Some of these kids started to evoke vocalization.
Wow.
Some of these kids would
it's empowering, right?
would just say, what's happening, like that, what's happening now.
Wow.
And so I had people there like that were working with these kids from a very early age that were crying when this was happening. This was happening, they were crying, like they couldn't believe it. And I said, the motor systems are very powerful, and they are present in everything from smooth muscles to swallow. They share the breathing muscle and the vocalization muscle. So it's a very powerful thing. When you have entrainment and resonance, you have this whole ability to coordinate all those muscles and say something. So that's not surprising to us that we work on the field of neuromotor control and we create models to do this. It was not surprising. This is what you should be doing. Well, they kicked us out, the top leadership.
They kicked you out.
They said, this is okay, you took the data that you needed.
Wow.
Goodbye. And so I moved to Indiana to do this. So I had the funding from the NSF, and I put a postdoctoral fellow over there in Indiana. I met a collaborator in Indiana, and we moved the study over there, and we finished the study in Indiana.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. Well, good.
That's my start in autism.
Wow. So you were kind of thrown into the controversy, from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
And so how would you explain, because again, I think for so many people, who see autism as, a behavior issue or a behavioral disorder, that's starting to change, particularly I think within some of the communities that we share, the spelling community and such. But that's still a relatively small community. So how would you explain kind of, for those hearing for the first time, what it means to see autism as sensory, motor difference rather than a behavioral disorder?
Well, first of all, the behavioral disorder is a made up thing that somebody made it up to create a problem so they could create a solution for it. And well, I'm going to give you a solution to these problems. You better come to me for it. So it's made up. It's a business model. It's not real in terms of that it works. It doesn't work. I mean, we know it doesn't work since the early 60s, where
wow, no kidding.
Behaviorists, animals would stop learning, and that's where they stopped reporting what was happening. I mean, this is known in the neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience community, where animals are trained to do a task, to perform a task, so that you can record spikes from their brain, so that you can learn and build preclinical trial models and genetically modified models and study phenomena under those conditions. So we know this for a long time, but it was a powerful industry. And so it started in 1970. Lovas, a student of Skinner at UCLA, created this conditioning, behavioral conditioning technique, which was originally, it was actually targeting sort of feminine boys at the time. So that's what they would call it. And it was known as gay conversion therapy or something like that. That was the original. And then they switched to this applied behavioral analysis, fancy name, which doesn't have analysis of any kind that we call analysis in my neck of the woods.
Right.
It's a joke. Like, what are you doing? This is,
what are you analyzing? Yeah,
what
right.
are you analyzing? Numbers that you create by hand, that you made up, and you then it's like really like non-science at all, non-reproducible, not open, nothing. It's like 25,000 words or something that you memorize and you get certified. So
I just want to pause. I mean, I think again, pause on that point, because again, that's something I had learned, but again, I think the general population doesn't realize, again, like you said, that the roots of the system of we're talking about ABA, which is wildly, I won't even say popular, but wildly prescribed, wildly used within the world of autism. The roots of it, like you said, with the founder of it, I also have the same roots, like you said, in what's considered gay conversion therapy, which has been awful and debunked, and like there's a lot of other things. So there's some parallels there that I think people again should be aware of, that that's generally not out there in the public.
It's not, and it's sort of like when I watch the Sackler family, the Sackler, how they dupe the public into OxyContin, and it's not.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's not addictive, and that it's a marketing plot. It's what it is, a marketing plot.
Absolutely.
It's a model. They're very good at marketing. They're very good
at messaging. And I say that, as a marketer myself, you're right.
Yeah. And they have a very strong lobby and go straight for mandates. So it's like a sure bet, like you buy Monday in New Jersey, you have to register. You have to register, and that's the registry, and they only have access to that themselves. Nobody else, as a scientist, we can't access the registry. Even in the identified form and compliant with our, IRB, institutional review boards, committees, and whatever that, So it's a marketing plot, and it's very successful, and it has a tier level. So you get kids from right out of high school, and they get anywhere, I don't know, I think it's 90 hours of training on these words that don't have any physiological meaning. They just sound fancy, but they don't really have any physiological meaning. Like you have to characterize the
Yeah.
nervous system that you're working with. So
Yeah.
so that like the physiology, I mean, we have Nobel Prizes in physiology and medicine for a reason, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a Nobel Prize in behaviorism? Because it's not even a discipline that we consider serious.
And yet, again, like you said, part of the messaging, and I say this as someone who, we bought into this when Stone was 5. Again, it's funny because so kind of like our journey kind of tracks yours, Liz, in the sense that he was diagnosed in September of 2008. That's when he, just before his 3rd birthday. So we've been on this path, of trying all the different therapies, starting, doing floor time, biomedical, this and that. But of course, one of the things that was preached to us right around that time when he was 5 or 6, oh, you've got to do ABA. You got to do ABA. It's the only data-driven model that shows results. And we didn't know what that meant. We just wanted him to be able to communicate. And we were told, oh yeah, this will help him communicate, which it did no such thing at all, of course.
No, it's like, unfortunately, because look, what I have found among the practitioners, you have practitioners that are very passionate about what they're doing, and
Yeah.
they think they've been duped to. They think that what they're doing is it. But they don't know any better because they haven't gone outside of their little
Right.
realm. So they don't know that other fields in science exist that do behavior analysis, but for real. Like, that's what I do for a living, behavior analysis. But like,
Yeah, I think that's a very fair and important comment to note too. Like I said, and again, from our experience, all of the practitioners that, those that Stone worked with, they were great. I mean, most of them, there's 1 or 2 that weren't so great, but their hearts were in the right place. They thought, like you said, they really wanted to help, and they bonded. They bonded with Stone. They tried, and so there's to no fault of theirs. In the same category, I extend that to speech therapy as well, because again, that was the other area that we were steered, of course, because Stone was non-speaking. Well, you got to get him into speech therapy, but as you know better than I, speech therapy can help when you're dealing with, sensory motor issues, right? That has nothing to do with it at all. So in spite of, hour after hour of quote unquote therapy, again, that couldn't help, but it wasn't the fault of the therapist. It was just the wrong application for what we were dealing with.
yeah. So we ran a study a couple years ago, surveying the BCBAs themselves. They created the survey themselves. We had the funding to fund them to do problem discovery, like basically what they wanted was like an open-ended thing, so that to discover what it is that they wanted. And they do want change. They feel frustrated themselves because they don't see the progress that is promised by this therapy, and they see that they're behind. They're behind. They see that, so they've been told that they have to preserve the principles of ABA. We're talking behaviorism started in 1930s. Proof of concept with pigeon and rats, 1950s. And then 1970, conversion to human children without any proof that this was appropriate or didn't pose a risk to the nervous system, to the nascent nervous system that needs its autonomy to function later on in life. And that's their principles, their sacred principles, my God. And listen, nothing in science is sacred like that. It's all up for grabs. We make mistakes and we fix them. That's what we do. That's
100%, right. Yeah, right.
We criticize ourselves. If you see somebody that is protecting their paradigm as this is it, they're not scientists. This is a cult.
It's a cult, right? Yeah, there's nothing scientific about that, and we see a lot of different examples of that, unfortunately, in our world in different areas. As far as, like you said, that's not really wanting to address the science. So I want to jump into our first segment, because this is going to open up something that I want to make sure that we have time to talk about, because I think it's really important. And that's The segment is going to be autism, fact or fiction. So we've got a little opening for this, and then I'll read the statement.
Get QuickTime ready, and here we go. This is Autism, Fact or Fiction. We're breaking down what's real, what's rumor, and what might surprise you. Let's go.
Okay, so this week's fact or fiction is going to be a statement that probably will resonate with everyone because it's been all over the place. And so the fact or fiction statement, Dr. Torres, is there an epidemic of autism?
Oh, yeah, that's a very interesting one. So let's take the opposite approach, right? It's being increasing exponentially. Let's saturate, right?
2,000% increase since, or something like that, right?
So let's saturate that. So at this rate, and then there's a convergence process. Let's saturate that to 1 in 1, like 1 per 1 in children of school age will have autism at that exponential rate and the rate at which it's changing. And and so let's then work that back, like reverse engineer it in a way. So how do you do this epidemiology surveillance that gives you the 1 in 31 that they got this time, right?
Yeah. Where did that come from?
So you take a random draw of the school age population.
Okay.
It's very important that it's a random draw, right? Because otherwise you bias the whole thing, right?
Yep.
So the random draw, you take kids from a school age in the US, right?
Okay.
From the 51 states. All right. So then we go back to the therapies, right? The therapies that are funded by insurance are ABA, SLP, and OT. A type of OT, not the sensory integration, but not the sensory processing or integration, but the other generic OT. So those are funded, right?
Right.
If they were working, and particularly ABA claims that 30% of the children that are, given ABA will walk out of the spectrum, will lose the diagnosis. So that's like unlike a TED talk. This is like, so if that was the case, you would be flattening the curve because everybody in the school system takes those very effective therapies, right?
Right.
And we saw this during COVID. During COVID, we had an exponential raise in infections. It's epidemiology.
Yeah.
101. The moment the vaccine came, we flattened the curve. Remember, flatten the curve. A lot of people. What is flatten the curve? Okay, yeah, this vaccine is effective, so the infection is going down. So this is not an infection, but it's something that is built with biostatistics of the same kind, which is not anything difficult to do. It's counting and binning and giving you a number. Okay, there's nothing like. You're not splitting the atom here. This is like nothing, okay?
Yeah.
Anybody can do this. Okay, so now you go and you sample from a random draw the population, you get these numbers. Why are they increasing?
Right. That's the question. I mean, there are a lot of people who obviously have a lot of different theories and philosophies, but why don't you talk about what we were talking about just before we started?
So that then brings me a business model, right? The industrial complex of autism that we're now by now familiar with. By now we know about it. There's even a book by Alicia. I can't remember her name now. But
oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's called the industrial complex. Yeah, I'll get the name.
Okay. Yeah.
Escaping. Not very good with names. So it's a catch-all diagnosis, and so under that umbrella term, you have Down syndrome, Tourette's, OCD, cerebral palsy, all kinds of.
Those are all listed under. Those are all listed under autism now?
They're not listed. They are in the
Or I
autism
mean, yeah,
spectrum.
they're. Oh, okay,
So-
gotcha.
So
Yeah,
when they
right.
come, when people come to the lab or when we survey people, they have a diagnosis of autism. In fact, I went to the reason why I asked is why isn't flattening the curve? Because I went all the way back to 2002 because the Department of Education has open access to the records. And I'm a
Okay.
data scientist.
Yeah.
So I downloaded all the records from 2002 to 2016, and I study the trends in autism, language acquisition disorders, blindness, all the disability, all the special needs that are funded by the state of New Jersey. So I did this in New Jersey, all the
Okay.
counties, all the 21 counties, and so forth. So first of all, I found out there was a cap of 220,000 kids that were serviced by the special needs in the schools. And secondly, I found a trend that as the years progressed and autism is receiving more services, diagnosis in other disorders, in other disabilities will go into the autism and inflate the exponential rate. But you can see how they do that by playing with the numbers, and you see the empirical data, the actual numbers, without the models, like the actual numbers. You see how they go from one year to the next year to the next year into the autism diagnosis.
So
Because-
they're shuffled around. I mean, the bucket's still kind of the overall bucket in terms of the services remains relatively flat over time,
right,
or
right.
proportionally, at least I would imagine.
But the marketing promise is that you get more services. So the people that make this, that do the diagnosis, the pediatricians, the clinical psychologists, the psychiatrists,
Yep.
they have a broader criteria. So if you move from like the DSM, you move from the DSM-4 to the DSM-5, and it's a significant change there, which is that ADHD and Asperger's were separate disorders, and they were subsumed into autism spectrum disorders in the DSM-5. And so you just open the floodgates to all kinds of people that were not considered in the autism spectrum. And the consequence for that is that now you have to produce services from a very heterogeneous population. At one end of the spectrum, you have people with high support needs of motor control and sensory hypersensitivity and motor issues. And on the other side, you have people that are capable of like doing computer programming, but have also issues that they feel uncomfortable, socially is awkward, and things like that. Like a lot of us in the scientific community belong in that category pretty much, because it's just the way that our brain works. And so you have this very disparate two sides, and with different support needs, and you have a one-size-fits-all model for them, both in treatments, in services, and also at the educational end of things. So you have an IEP which really pushes for these three therapies that are available at the school, because they're what are available at the school, and they're what the county and the district is going to get money for, and so forth. So it's a whole ecosystem.
Can I just touch on that again? Because I don't think people realize that as well, that districts will be reimbursed in terms of providing those services for students, what, like you said, speech therapy, whatever, those types of services. They receive extra funding for each student, right?
Yeah. So the one thing is, there is an inherent conflict of interest at many levels.
At many levels, right?
The people that are receiving profits from it are not being, there's no oversight. There's no, they're doing the decision making, and they're doing everything is in their hands, and there is no commission with no skin in the game. There's no commission that says, okay, this is right, or this is wrong, or this poses a risk. So like, I give you an example. When I launch a study in my lab, there's a balance of risks and benefits that we always have to do.
Sure.
And it's in the best interest of the child. And there is something called the Helsinki Act that is to avoid doing experimentation on human subjects, like the type that the Nazis did during, Hitler era, right? So
yeah, very reasonable, right?
And so the Helsinki Act was put in place so that we don't make these mistakes of the past, right? But no such a thing exists in the clinical domain. You do all these things that pose a great deal of risk and discomfort to the child, that you should, in our labs, we would stop the moment and have to report the moment there is discomfort for the child. This is not the case in these therapies, interventions, a school system, nothing like that. There is no commission, no external commission. Like, we have external committees that look multidisciplinary, that look over what we're doing, our science. Nothing like this exists. You have one type of discipline overlooking everything, and that discipline, which is the behaviorist, and that like poses all the directives that people have to follow, including researchers, because the diagnosis is fundamentally flawed, but researchers have to follow by that diagnostics criteria. And so there is no commission like with technical knowledge, like people who know math and computational and create technology, like the STEM field, for example, science, technology, engineering, and math, the people that, put people in the moon, and that kind of people, the engineers, the math, the people that are doing that, they don't have even a clue of what's going on in autism. Like, I do, because I accidentally came across it and I said, what? Like, no, this cannot be. This is a joke. I didn't believe it at first. And now, a number of years later, I'm like, wow, this is the real, like, this is for real. They really hijacked a whole discipline and have an industrial complex and a business model, and they have bypassed the human factor in the business model. They're just making money. And now it's in the hands of, private equity firms and people.
Private equity firms, right. Yeah. And they are the ones who are threatened most. Again, like you said, that's kind of this industrial complex. Like, once you start kind of putting the pieces together, when you see areas of success, like with RPM, spelling to communicate, which, Stone was able, finally unlocked him to communicate, as with, now thousands of others. But the pushback, the formal pushback, including ASHA's outrageous statement, which we've talked about here, and school districts pushback, people say, how could they do that? Like, how could people be against this? Well, it's because it works. It's because, right? Because it works. And this threatens to upset the apple cart in terms of, like I said, again, from my own personal experience, 12 years of speech therapy did nothing compared to one day, my very first day, 2 sessions of spelling to communicate, in terms of getting him to communicate, right? Like, that's a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah. And I think fundamentally what's happening here is that, so you have this system of, like, nonprofit in the US, nonprofit organizations that create an accreditation system and self-nominate, themselves as the experts on a particular thing.
Right. Yep.
And then they go and somehow they're allowed to accredit people to do things on people. And so somehow that system really doesn't work when you don't have external people with no skin in the game, or that are, experts on a variety. Is a very complex problem. So you have to have expertise on a multi-dimensional.
Yes.
You can't possibly do this with expert on one thing that is not even essential to what the problem is at the end.
Right.
So I think that's one problem that we could address. Look, you are the consumers of these things. So you don't have to consume it. You have to come up with a different path altogether. Unite yourselves and create a path. You know, and these accreditations should be multidimensional. It should be multidisciplinary, and it should be a system that is measured objectively, you know, through the physiology of the system, and it should have very precise guidelines on risk versus benefits, and it should have a commission that oversees everything that's going on. One thing that the behaviorists have is that they're very united. It's like a cult. So they're very, very united. This is not the case. It's not what I've seen in these emerging techniques that help the child to spell to communicate or to RPM or so on. They don't help each other. They're competing because of the lack of resources and so forth. So this is something that people need to consider in that realm. They need to come together, unified under a common cause and a common science that we can create together with the STEM people, with the digital revolution that we can do. This is massive. We can do this. This is not something like far-fetched. We can actually do this, but they have to come together because they're fighting each other. Because like right now in the news with all this stuff that's going on, there's all these fights between parents and parents.
Oh, it's awful. Yeah,
it's
you're right.
Awful. And I look at it and it's like, what a shame, because they could be united and they could really advance with the techniques that we have. You could really advance this for, you know, the better lives of the kids. But
which is what it should be. I mean, that should be ultimately be the focus. You're right. And yeah, that's a whole nother topic we could spend a lot of time talking about. There is divisiveness. It's something, again, once I've kind of came into this community through Spelling to Communicate, once, you know, again, our experience, it became apparent to me as well. And I thought it's really unfortunate because, like you said, you need, you know, you can come together and do a lot. But if the community is divided, it makes it a lot harder to make progress, and it allows the status quo to remain the status quo, unfortunately. And, you know, so there's part of me that thinks, hey, you know, there's motivation for other influences to keep the community divided. I've questioned even, again, RFK Jr.'s statement. I mean, he knows producer Dave, who you met, yeah, he and I did a segment, a whole episode last week about that. And, you know, one of my points is that, you know, RFK Jr. has been in this for a long time. And in terms of this world, he should know better, you know, when you're talking about those who are profoundly impacted, but by making the broad sweeping generalizations that he did, you know, ignited this firestorm. And so that was, you know, either intentionally or unintentionally. Either way, it's still bad, right? Because the end result is, again, we have a very a divided community, which is really unfortunate, and it's going to make it really difficult to move forward.
But it's pretty easy to guess who's behind it, because
yeah, sure it is.
Division, right? So I know I'm not guessing, because, you know, I know very well the person that made it to the front line of the New York Times, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. I'm not gonna talk about it on the air, but I can tell you, I know this crowd very well, the ones that are in that pushing the epidemiology, and of course it's a problem, and it's terrible problem. We're gonna solve it for you, and here's the scientific evidence that we have, that, you know, it's all science-based, and so on, so on. It's like, oh my God. So, but it's terrible. I mean, it's even if this person, Kennedy, has the best intentions, which I think he does, it's been ruined by this ill advice he's receiving, because what he might not understand is the type of business model that he's into. Like, or he might, I don't know, but you know, who knows what's behind
who
that,
knows?
but I know who is behind the crowd that is pushing the inflated diagnosis, epidemiology, and the whole thing, because just what I said before, like if these treatments were working, you would be flattening the curve. You would not be exponentially growing. Clearly, they're not working. And clearly,
Right.
the parents see that and pull the kids out of the treatments. And they
Yep.
need more people to fulfill their, you know how many in 2015 nonprofit organizations with the word autism in their title that are declared by the IRS are in New Jersey?
Now, how many?
3,000.
3,000?
Those people are competing for resources and not collaborating. This is a competitive
Oh my
model, not a
gosh. I mean, I
collaborative.
knew it was, oh, that's crazy. I knew it was segmented, like, but that's just in one state.
That's just one state.
Wow.
You can download this as public information. You can download.
Oh, I believe you. I mean,
you
like
know,
I said,
it's a Google search away. I'm a data scientist, so I see trends and patterns. So that's what I did. I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here? So 2015, I did this, and it's like, oh my God.
wow. We have a little bit more time. Like I said, we could talk forever. But one of the things I want to get back to the motor skills. We're okay. Hey, Stone. Good to see you again. Is let's do our tip of the week, because it involves motor skills.
Hey parents, gather around, it's time to speak. We're here with your tip of the week. Strategies and wisdom just for you. Autism parents, we know what you go through.
All right, so now it's time for our tip of the week. It's going to be kind of twofold, and I just I had a couple things on my side. I don't know, Liz, if you have anything you want to share, but for me, I was going to talk about, you know, so when you're supporting, you know, a non-speaking individual, it is important to remember that speech is a motor skill, and communication, for that matter, is a motor skill. And, you know, along these lines, one of the things that we've learned is just, again, that this with the brain body disconnect, you know, with the motor skills that we see with so many, a lot of times, you know, some of these individuals, like my son, may have the ability to say something, but it isn't necessarily what they intend, you know. So they kind of say, believe what I spell, not what I say, you know, and that this is something that they have to use motor to communicate. So that's my tip of the week.
Yeah, I my tip of the week is to try and use technology, you know, like wearables, and we're gonna create this ability for people to use this at home, like a simple Apple Watch or a Fitbit, so that you can track the regularization of your heart, of your child's heart, and of your own heart, and see how you can calm each other. And so this is something we're working on. So you can, the tip would be to try and use technology that already exists and has been used for other things, like people
That's
are
a good
using
one.
to track their steps or their exercises regimes or their dieting regimes and so on. But you can repurpose that. You can repurpose that technology to track the type of regularization of the heart, which is very important for everything from therapies that you take to classes, education, to just being day to day in your activities of daily life. So that would be a tip. And we're going to work with one of the moms in our state, Manisha Ladd. She has a center called the Sensory Pathway, and we're working with her to create programs to educate parents on how to use existing technologies and repurpose them for this type of
Oh, great. That's great. One of the things, because I thought it was so fascinating, again, before we started, you shared with us a diagram, kind of a screen share. I was wondering if maybe we could just spend two minutes or so, if you could kind of give the speed reading version of it, and we'll talk through it for those of you who are listening, because I think it's really important to talk about, again, what your findings, and again, something that people don't realize in terms of the body regulation and just the impact it has on this community.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share the screen, but we deployed a static co-regulation for all through Jeannie Breen and Elizabeth Bunker in collaboration with
Yeah.
you're in it, right? And
well, we unfortunately weren't able to participate, but yeah, I'm well aware of it. Yeah.
But it's open. We have about 20 something families that have been giving us the data from the face and from the heart for the last 2.5 months or so, since February.
Right.
And so now it's a model, it's a protocol that we have it down so that we will distribute it to the families once we're done.
Oh, great.
And we'll have an app to download from the App Store, and just like a regular app, you purchase it and you can take like your measurement of your heart and of your face, of your face, and then we'll extend it to the heart. But let me just share with you why this is so revealing, because and that is people that they should know about it. So we've been doing this type of research first, not in autism, just in general, just the human domain of neurotypical domain, and then in autism, the human domain of autism. And we have now characterized from head to toe the biorhythms of the human body. So the face and there are, so this central figure you see here, these are very exquisite maps that we have from the face, from the body, you know, above the neck, below the neck, above, you know, the trunk, below the trunk. These are maps that we have been characterizing digitally. And so here's the face. Here's the face of a grid, a grid divided into zones. This is called the ophthalmic, the maxillary, and the mandibular zone of the face. This is a control child, neurotypical, at rest. So this is just sitting there at rest. And this is the face, typical face of an autistic child that we have recorded consistently over and over. And these kind of wiggles that you see here is dysregulation. And then I'm just
going to jump in real quick here, just again, for those who are listening. Again, this will be easier for those who are watching it on YouTube, but this is facial and bodily maps and how they're different in autism. And again, the control group, you can see that it's pretty clear, right? There's not a lot of activity with that. Whereas you looked at the ASD group, there's a cluster of activity all over. That kind of shows activity all over. Would that be an accurate way of putting it?
That's right. Yeah, it's a very dysregulated and requires a lot of effort. So to unpack this little dot here is this is 5 seconds of, like, it's a snapshot. It's 5 seconds, and this is like a little trajectory, that the motion line that it's all packed into this little dot. It looks like a dot, but it's if you unpack it, it's a whole trajectory.
Okay.
Space and time. But so the brain doesn't have to consume a lot of energy to produce that, because it's very little, right? So here the brain has to produce a lot of energy, consume a lot of energy to produce that, and a lot of cognitive overload supervising that. So that's one way to put it. Like, this excess activity has to be supervised, and that creates a load, a cognitive load of the brain trying to supervise its own motions that self-generates.
And then that's just I was gonna say, jump down to the heart, because I thought that was
the heart is very important, because that's kind of our autonomic system. And if you go and you see the same child control resting, you see this blue activity. So it's like,
all looks kind of consistent, just kind of blue and kind of chill. Yeah,
and it's like chill, chill. And over time, so you take a few minutes of these with like the Apple Watch or a sensor that we bought in Amazon and on the internet. Just this all now off the shelf technology, and you look at the frequency bands of this, and it's all like blue, nice. But if you see this, neurotypical person in pain, suffering from pain, chronic pain or induced pain, or just,
Right.
then you see this yellow band that appears in the lower frequency band.
It's like a
And
flare up almost of,
yeah.
yeah.
And so you see that, and this is what we see when someone is in pain and in flight or fight mode. The heart is in flight or fight mode, very anxious, a lot of stress. And then we take the autistic kids and we have them at rest, just at rest, nothing, like no activity, just at rest. And you see by default the same kind of high power in the low frequency band, indicating the flight or fight mode. And that's kind of a lot of the anxiety and the sort of a stressful activity that you see in the system. So and that's the default. So this is something,
and that's the default. That's how they are. Like, that's how their bodies is, kind of like almost all the time when they're awake. I mean,
yeah. So now with the study that we're following, the face and the heart go together. So when in the pain situation, we know from the neurotypicals that the face can serve as a proxy of the dysregulation in the heart. And so what we're doing with the autistic population that we're sampling from now is asking whether in that case also, because in the pain, you reflect the pain in the face. And so
right.
So now in autism, we want to know if these patterns that we see in the face correspond to the heart patterns of dysregulation, because we could then use the face as a proxy of the dysregulation state. And a simple app that we have built could tell you, look, step back and give the child a rest because he's in dysregulated state.
Yeah, he's overloaded, dysregulated.
Overloaded, just give it a break. And so this works, in general for other biorhythms. I won't go into them because we don't have time, but
right, yeah.
But I mean, for the population that points, this is also very dysregulated. The pointing is very demanding, the pointing task.
Yeah.
Also the gait, the walking,
right,
very demanding and very different. The gaze, like how the eye looks in 3D and points the eyes towards visual stimuli, is very, very different in autism. So in general, what we've done is we spent a good 20 years of our career sampling from the human biorhythms. So we have a pretty good sense of what they are, what states are dysregulated, what states are like relaxed, and so on. So now we're at a stage where we're putting this into apps and making it available so that with the palm of your hand, you can have some device that tells you, hey, take it easy. And this is for any therapy, okay? So if you're doing ABA, you want to know this. If you're doing SLP,
right,
you want to know this. If you're doing OT, you want to know this. So it's really it's like a neutral observer, if you will, because it doesn't depend. It's like a thermometer.
Right, yeah.
Takes the temperature. It doesn't matter what my opinion is, whether you have a fever or not. It doesn't matter my opinion. The temperature of the thermometer is not lying. So this is the same. I'm not putting in there any heuristics or like, if you do this, do that, or say this, or threshold this, or none of that. It's like, it is what it is. It's based on your biorhythms, and it is what it is. I don't make this up.
That's great. That's fascinating. And will this be available like through the website? Will people be able to access it, track it? How can people kind of continue to monitor this?
So we're at the study now. The study phase is a research phase, and we're going to be sampling tens of thousands of people. The sampling of the heart rate variability is more limited to those who have an Apple Watch, and we can instruct them, or those who can buy this sensor in Amazon, we can instruct them how to do so that we match the face and the heart. But in terms of the face, we already know the levels of noise, and we're going to be sampling tens of thousands of people, because the good news about the face is that MIT has a large database.
Mhm.
A lot of different universities, and Europe has multiple databases, so we can process these information, so it's worldwide. Any human, it's like, and so we're building that repository of these ranges, and yeah, 5 seconds.
Wow. So, sorry, okay, if we drop your email address in the show notes for the people who may want to reach out to you and if they have questions.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That'd be great. Gosh, Dr. Torres, I wish we could go on forever, but we can't. So we need to wrap for now. I definitely want to have a part 2 a little later this year because there's so much more to cover. But thank you very much for joining me today, covering all this great information.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And also, for those who are interested, we have a certificate that we have created to educate people about all these biorhythms and the physiology from birth to adulthood. And we cover, it's 4 courses. We have very flexible ways to take it. It's all online at your own pace. And if you find people, like group of people, we have group discounts, and we're going to do office hours to discuss all of these.
Great.
My postdocs and I. So please check out our website. I'm going to give you the information so that you pass it on to your audience.
Yeah, we'll definitely make that available. Well, super. Well, that's a wrap on this week's Lighter Side of the Spectrum. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, hopefully you learned as much as I did. I think this is really interesting and important information for those of us in the community. Please share your thoughts, give us your feedback, reviews, all of that, and we'll catch you next time on the Lighter Side of the Spectrum.